Back in the early 2000s, these blue little boxes were shaking things up, providing easy to set up and run web hosting appliances, coming complete with a web UI for configuring your web hosting experience right from your web browser. The question is, can I bring this back to life? Obsolete computer technology is my passion. I'm the vintage collector and these are my stories. So when opening up this machine, I'll first have a look at the mainboard, because from experience I may see some blown capacitors. Oh, and how I do, look at this, they're bulged, so I may need to actually replace these. Also, there's some signs of leakage onto the PCB. I'm also having a look at the CR2033 cell if it's still any good. It still shows a 2.86 volts charge, so not a full voltage anymore, so I'll be replacing it for good. And with that being done, I'm risking it to now power it on. The worst that could happen would be to blowing up a fuse or the caps, seeing some blue smoke, but see, it happily powers up. But despite the hard drive spinning up, the system exposes the reboot loop, essentially being stuck at the Cobalt Networks logo and the loading kernel message. This is a typical symptom of these machines when they fail to find the boot partition. Now, the thing is, in order to restore this, you need another machine to perform a network install. This by itself will not yet be necessarily a problem, I have plenty of gear around. But the original FTP servers of both Cobalt Networks and Sun Microsystems are long gone, so where to get the ISO file from? I searched everything, and while there was some ISOs at archive.org, none of them was the ones needed for the RaQ3. There's also this website RaQport.com, which hides the ISOs behind a paywall. And even while they charge only $5 for the ISO, it's $5 too much for something that used to be freely available in previous times. Even if I'd be willing to spend those $5, it still would be halfway the stuff, as there was plenty of patches and utilities available on the original Cobalt FTP servers. But eventually, after many hours of online research, I found this single server which holds a copy of the original Cobalt FTP servers. And from what I can tell, it seems to be fairly complete. So I took the opportunity to mirror everything locally and pack it up into archives, which I then uploaded to archive.org in order to preserve it before it's definitely lost to time. Still, I couldn't manage to locate the RaQ3 ISO file, as even this one was missing from this particular FTP server. But I found the RaQ550 ISO, for which there also exists an online tutorial how to install it onto the RaQ3, though it involves additional efforts like flashing the ROM to a newer firmware, which, again, resorts on having a running system already. But then I remembered. I actually had salvaged 2 of these machines, of which I had transformed one a few years ago into a Kodi Media Center, which I'm still using to this day. And while you can see how I yanked out everything and replaced the heart of the machine with Raspberry Pi, I actually do still own the original hard drive. And I do hope to be lucky.
I can't believe this.
Someone woke up on the wrong side of the planet, it seems. So what's your point of criticism today?
Now, you butcher the Cobalt RaQ3 and tell us you still have its hard drive around after all these years.
Yes, because you never know. You didn't expect that, huh? But before I'm turning it on again using that other hard drive, I'll quickly address those noisy fans. They sound totally unhealthy and really should be replaced. You'll find one behind the power supply, so it has to be removed. The second fan sits behind the CPU, and to access it, the mainboard has to be unfastened. But then I'll eventually hook up that other hard drive. Also replaced the IDE cable and added a Y cable for the power distribution, as I want to see that I can clone that hard drive later on. Now, will it boot? Yes! Awesome! It really seems to come up. The first thing I'm doing is to change the network setting so I may be able to access it from the network. Thank God the system was not locked, so I could change it from the front panel. Also, I tried to reset the admin password, which goes by pressing the arrow buttons and the reset button at the same time. And thankfully this worked as well, and so I could finally access the web UI, which also allowed me to enable Telnet so I could log in via the console. This machine also has an SSH daemon installed, though I noticed something wrong during the login, with the logins eventually ending up on timeouts. I'll have to look at this at a later stage. So here I am inspecting the system a bit, seeing that this drive is a 10GB hard drive. That was pretty much standard for 1999 when this machine came out. But nowadays, 10GB for running a web server is ridiculously small. But anyway, I want to investigate now some options how I could clone the operating system onto a bigger hard drive.
Why don't you just plug it into another machine, boot up Linux and clone it from there?
Yes, I could, but then I have to be very careful. The Cobalt network firmware cannot boot from modern day created Linux partitions. Wait, let me explain. The Cobalt firmware expects the hard drive to be MBR partitioned, and the boot partition must actually be an Extended 2 revision 0 file system. The moment you touch the drive with anything newer than a 2.2 Linux kernel, you would upgrade the partition to the Extended 2 revision 1 format without asking. There is ways to revert back, but simply speaking, leave it alone, don't touch it, or you risk ending up with an unbootable hard drive. I had made this experience myself many years ago, so that's why I'm trying to clone the drive now from within this running operating system. First, I'm hooking up this second Maxter IDE hard drive as a slave drive. It offers a 120GB capacity, which is well below the 127GB LBA28 limit of this machine. Then I'd start by simply saving the partitions using DD. But look at this, I'd eventually end up with this file too large error message. I really felt like a complete idiot at that point. Really?
Yeah, I could have told you that Linux systems of that period had a 2GB maximum file size limitation.
True story, and I totally forgot about that. Nowadays, there's no problem with dealing with large multi-gigabyte files at all, but back then, so I had to go other routes. I went to download a static build of the part image utility, release 0.6.1 to be exact, to dump those partition images. As it supports automatic file splitting, it easily works around the 2GB file size limitation, and so I could store the partition backups away onto my NAS. So once I had these first backups taken, I went on to partition the second hard drive. I replicated the partition scheme, though I wanted to enlarge the partition sizes, especially for the root and the var partitions. Then I'd eventually restore those previously taken backups. However, part image would not automatically enlarge the file system to match the partition length. Resizing a file system was already possible 23 years ago, but I found that the resized 2FS was not being available on the Cobalt OS. So again, I went out to find an old version of the E2FS procs release 1.15, which I would then compile locally on the Cobalt using the usual configure and make commands. I would spare though the make install, as I see this purely as a one-off operation. As you may have noticed, I took the partition backups on a hot system, that means when the partitions were live mounted. Granted, this is not really recommended best practice and should never be done on a real live system. But here, when literally just the shell was running during the backup, I acknowledged the risk of minor inconsistencies. But now that I want to resize the file system, I have to quickly run E2FS check on those newly created partitions. Not unexpectedly, the file system check will complain about some inconsistencies, but I can live with that and have it simply auto-corrected. Once this completed for all partitions, I could finally run resize2fs, which enlarged the file systems to match the maximum partition size.
But you did tamper around with the partitions still. The original drive had just 4, but now you're having 5. What's up?
Indeed, I restored the original HDA1 to HDA3 as primary partitions just as before. But then I created an extended partition into which I restored the former HDA4 home partition now as an extended partition. And I then created even another one behind, which I would then use as a separate data partition. And accordingly, I have to quickly fix that in the /etc/fstab file and point it from the /def/HDA4 to the new /def/HDA5 to match this revised partition scheme.
And you really think it's still gonna boot up?
Well, see for yourself. After removing the original boot drive and making this master drive the sole drive in the system, it just boots up fine.
You know, I wonder about the power consumption of this system.
You'd be surprised actually. I had the amps meter connected for quite a while already, and even with 2 hard drives connected, I barely saw more than a 0.2 amps draw. As I measured on a 230 volts grid, this equates to roughly 46 watts in idle mode. Of course, on the heavy load, the power consumption would be expected to be a bit higher.
What I still don't get, why all these hassles so far if you intend to upgrade that machine to that newer RaQ550 Cobalt OS anyway?
Bingo! For one, I wanted to retain the original software state as much as possible, plus having a backup in case this upgrade turns out the wrong way is a good choice anyways. And, as mentioned before, upgrading requires flashing a new firmware, which requires running OS. This walkthrough that I mentioned before gives straight instructions on what to upgrade. That was also the reason I was searching before for a mirror for the former Cobalt FTP service, as both the firmware and also the flash utility were just located thereon. As I had succeeded with that venture, I now have the perfect precondition for continuing with my upgrade journey to a more modern Cobalt OS. First, I'd store the current flash image into a backup file, as you never know. And then I'm ready to flash the new firmware.
Are you sure you want to do this?
And let's go. Oh, what's this?
Failures on writing to the flash. That doesn't look too good actually.
Well, let's retry.
See, it doesn't get any better.
This must be a joke. No, 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 no! Oh my, it seems I really have a faulty flash chip. And even after many retries, I was unable to write the flash. Look at this! I bricked it!
You see, I did have a very bad feeling about this.
No! If you check out this channel's community tab, you'll find some polls on potential upcoming videos. You're very welcome to upvote on upcoming topics or drop in new ones you'd like me to chase down.